Okay, so now we're doing worksheet 4C. So this is our third video for lab 4, and now we're simply doing dual channel. Okay, so I have, in this case, my my probe, still back probe into the green wire on the injector, and my inductive amp clamp around the brown wire. So now we're looking at both signals together off of this injector. So if we come over to the scope now, okay, we can see the pattern that we've got up here. Okay, so I'm going to freeze this. Alright, so we can see right now the turn on, right, turn off. We can see our current ramp build. We can see our pintle open in our injector, and we can see it close on the voltage side. So in reality, our fuel is spraying from this point to this point. Even though the injector opens here, there's no fuel leaving it until we get to this point. So we need to build a magnetic field, like I said earlier, to lift the injector, and then once we shut it off at this point, it has to dissipate. It's not going to close immediately. It needs to dissipate that magnetic field, and that's why we see the pintle close over here. And that's when it's physically shut. So I have some cursors here I can actually bring into the screen, and we can place on those two areas. Oh, where are we here? Wrong one. There we go. So if I bring this cursor here and place it on my pintle close, and then I drag another one over and I put it on my pintle open, right there, the pulse width of our fuel injector, we can see right here, is actually 2.171 milliseconds. That is the time between the two cursors, and that is how long this fuel injector is actually spraying. So if I actually move these cursors now to the actual on and off time of the injector, we have the same amount of time. Okay, so we have to allow for the magnetic field to build and dissipate before the injectors actually physically close. Okay, and once again, by changing time base, oh, I have to make it live first. By changing time base, we're going to change our pattern. Okay, just like that. Alright. So, that is really the end of lab sheet 4C, but we're going to do something a little bit different. I need to show you something else before we finish this video. So what I'm going to do is just leave the screen for a moment, and we're going to come over here to the fuse relay box. Okay, and I'm going to take my amp clamp off of there for a moment, and we're just going to come over here. So in my fuse relay box, and actually I'm going to have to shut the vehicle off for a moment. So in my fuse relay box, if we look at the layout of our box here, we can see that we have an injector fuse, and it's right here in the box. Okay? So looking at the box, this camera struggles a little bit with focus, so we just have to be patient here. Alright, so we can see injector fuse there. So in actual fact, it's right here in the fuse box. So this is our injector fuse right there. So what am I going to do? Why would I bother doing this when I can go right to the injector like I did? What if I have a vehicle that's a V engine, so I have a V6 or a V8, and I have no access to my injectors? Okay, and that's fairly common on modern vehicles. A lot of our V6 engines, the injectors are covered by the intake manifold, and we have no access to them. So how could I diagnose my injectors without taking anything apart? The whole key to using a lab scope is non-intrusive testing. I don't want to have to take things apart in order to do diagnosis. That's time consuming, and expensive to the customer. So what I want to do is be able to do diagnosis from a central location. If I can't get to my injector like I can on this nice 4-cylinder engine, how am I going to go about that? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the fuse, and what I'm going to put in there in its place is a jumped loop of wire. So we have different types. Both of these I use. This one I made myself. Very inexpensive, works very, very well. This one is purchased. Okay, so now this one is, we buy this little piece on the bottom. It comes separate. I can unplug it so I can use this for other things. Okay, or I can plug it into, now this is simply a inline fuse that I've adapted for this purpose. Either one of these works perfectly, okay? And for a long time, this is all I used. I happened to buy some of these recently, so now we're going to try this out. So what am I going to do? I'm going to remove the fuse for the injectors, okay? And we're just going to put it off to the side here. I'll just leave it in the lid like that. And then I'm going to take my fuse jumper wire. Either one will work. And I'm going to plug it in place of the fuse. Okay, so now I have my circuit back intact. I can start this vehicle once again. So now my vehicle's running, right? Both amperages going through this, so we know I should have a magnetic field around this wire. And if I simply connect my amp clamp around this loop of wire, I'm going to have a pattern now on my scope again. Let me get around here and we'll go to our scope screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut off channel 1. We're not really looking at that. We're looking at amperage here. And we'll bring this down, and we need to get rid of that as well. I'm going to bring our trigger up, and there we go. So there is my current ramp for my injectors from the fuse, not at the injector. Now this is actually going to show me all of my injectors if I change my time base accordingly. So the shorter I make this, I'm going to see all of my fuel injectors. Okay, so this circuit actually goes to another circuit. So this voltage wire is shared by other circuits, as we saw when we first looked at the wiring diagram. So what we're seeing here is noise, right? This is noise interruption on another circuit. Okay, so we're seeing another device being controlled. What I'm concerned with are these peaks here, which are our fuel injectors. And we can see all of our fuel injectors. This repeats. I'm actually going to bring this out a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is turn on channel 1. So now we can see injector 1. So now I'm just going to tighten this up a little more. Alright, and then I'm going to freeze it. Boom, right there. Okay, so I can see injector 1 here. So my firing order for this engine is 1342. So I've got 1342. So two of the injectors look a little bit different than what I was expecting to see. Now this is 720 degrees of crankshaft rotation. This is injector 1 again. Okay, so I have a little bit of extra noise on these injectors. The injector is actually here, and this bottom portion is noise from that other circuit. Okay, but it gives me an indication that all of my injectors are operating from this point. And if I spread this open, okay, I can see, actually even see the pintle hump in that injector. Right, so that is 1 there. So this is going to be 2. This is going to be 4. It's very, very hard to do. It's not easy, but it is an option that you can do once you get used to it. Now the fact that this circuit is shared is why we have this unwanted noise on it. Filtering it out would definitely make it a little easier to see. I'm just going to move this down a little bit. Let's change our time base again. Alright, so now we can see a little bit better by tightening this right up. And actually what I can do with this scope, which is why this is, Pico is the premium scope to own, is when I freeze this, okay, what I can actually do now is zoom in on whatever section of this pattern I want to do. So now I'm simply going to draw a box around it, and there we go. So now I can see each one of my injectors. I've filtered that noise out, so I can minimize this, get it out of my way here, and we can see our injectors. So here is number 1 fuel injector, 3, 4, 2, and then 1 repeats. Okay, so 720 degrees between these 2 injector firing events, and I can see each one of my cylinders. So I have a good indication of whether I have a problem with them or not. Okay, and I can actually scroll through and look at them repeatedly through my screen. Great feature of this scope. Okay, Snap-on has something similar. Now I also own a Handtech scope, and it does not have nearly as many features, which is actually why I went and purchased a Pico scope, because the Handtech, even though it does work, is just not as good, obviously, as this one. So we can see all of our injectors from this point. So it's quite a valuable tool. Now, I'm back probed on number 1 injector. What if I couldn't get to that either? How would I do this? Well, I would just have to rely on what I'm seeing in amperage if I couldn't do that. I could possibly back probe coil number 1, and that would also show me where injector 1 would be. They wouldn't be lined up like this because our fuel injector does not fire on the same event as or the same stroke as our ignition. Our fuel injector actually fires on our exhaust stroke, not our top of compression. Okay, so that is the end of video 4C. So you can fill out your lab sheet and submit them all by the end of the day.